Welcome back to The Red Thread, the Left Voice podcast where we dig deep into socialism, workers' struggles, anti-imperialism, news, and everything related to our fight against capitalism. My name is Killian.
And I'm Emma. Today we're going to give a recap and break down the first week of Donald Trump's return to the White House for his second term. Let's start with the inauguration. The room was packed with Congress members, Supreme Court justices, international far-right politicians like Giorgia Meloni from Italy and Javier Milei from Argentina, and of course, the big tech billionaires who bankrolled his campaign. There's something like $12 trillion in market value standing behind Trump during his inauguration.
He wasted no time in claiming a mandate, despite barely winning the popular vote by 1.5%. He declared, "The golden age of America begins now."
Oh yes, the future is very bright for billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg. Oh, and let's not forget that Musk literally did the fascist salute.
Marx and Engels highlight this in the Communist Manifesto. They say, "The executive of the modern state is nothing but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie." Over 150 years later, this quote is more relevant than ever. They don't even try to hide it anymore. We are governed by the rich, for the rich.
Yeah, and let's not forget the Democrats. A few months ago, they were calling Trump a fascist, and now they're shaking his hand and talking about the peaceful transfer of power. That's classic Democratic Party. Fear tactics during the elections, and then they don't put up any real resistance.
This isn't just Trump. It's the whole bipartisan system enabling him. Bernie Sanders and union leaders like Sean Fain and Sean O'Brien are already signaling that they're willing to work with him.
So for today's episode, we're going to be reviewing what happened in Trump's first week in office and what it'll take to fight back.
Let's start with immigration. Trump wasted no time attacking immigrants from every angle. The first thing he did was declare a national emergency at the southern border.
Last Monday, the night of the inauguration, he signed an executive order attacking the right to asylum, and the CBP One app was shut down. This app is basically how asylum seekers schedule appointments at the border. So now thousands are stuck in limbo, basically starting from zero. And the Pentagon is sending 1,500 active duty troops to the US-Mexico border.
And the attacks aren't just at the border. Trump's administration is ramping up ICE raids in sanctuary cities and giving the green light for ICE to raid schools, hospitals, and religious sites.
But let's not forget, deportations didn't start last Monday. Biden's administration literally deported more undocumented migrants than Trump did in his first term. Not to diminish these attacks at all, but just to understand that they're very much bipartisan. Trump is escalating attacks that Democrats paved the way for.
I mean, the Lake and Riley Act just passed Congress. 48 Democrats voted for it in the House and 12 in the Senate. This is a super anti-immigrant law that's going to expand the scope of deportations and even criminalize people who assist undocumented immigrants.
And there's a sort of performative aspect to these attacks. He's kind of trying to show that he's doing something. He's trying to appeal to the most chauvinistic, nationalistic elements of Trump's base, who've been convinced by this right-wing narrative that immigrants are the reason for our living conditions getting worse and worse, rather than capitalist crisis. Is trying to sow nationalism, chauvinism, fear of the other in the US working class, and then also create terror for immigrant families and communities. And the real goal is just to divide us further. The more they can divide us, the more they can exploit us.
Now let's switch over to foreign policy. Trump's first week in office has been defined by a return to economic nationalism and aggressive trade policies. One of his first major actions is reintroducing tariffs on Canada, China, and Mexico.
Tariffs were a cornerstone of Trump's America First agenda during his first term, so this is basically a continuation of his protectionist policies. But it could also escalate trade tensions, it could affect global supply chains, and it could also raise costs for consumers both in the US and abroad.
Trump is also doubling down on aggression in Latin America, threatening to take back the Panama Canal. He's laying the groundwork for military intervention in the region.
He's sort of rebranding imperialism as quote-unquote peace through strength, while openly promising to expand US territory. He threatened to invade Greenland and literally change the name of the Gulf of Mexico. I'm still calling it Gulf of Mexico.
It's laughable that Trump has been posing as an arbiter of peace, while he's just continuing his unwavering support for Israel, who's been carrying out a live-stream genocide, and he's already hinted at developing Gaza.
You know, Gaza's interesting. It's a phenomenal location. On the sea, the best weather. Everything's good. It's like some beautiful things could be done with it, but it's very interesting. But some fantastic things could be done with Gaza.
How do you see the future in governance for Gaza?
Well, it depends. I can't imagine you could have, well, you certainly can't have the people that were there. Most of them are dead.
He also lifted the very mild sanctions on Israeli settlers in the West Bank on day one. Over the past week, settler violence in the West Bank has reached alarming levels, particularly in Jenin. On Friday, the State Department froze basically all foreign aid except for military financing to Israel and Egypt. This was announced by Marco Rubio, who the Senate just confirmed to head the State Department. Even Bernie Sanders voted to confirm him.
Next, let's talk about Trump's attacks on DEI. His administration has already started dismantling affirmative action, discrimination protection, and gender-inclusive policies.
There are already so many threats to trans youth, trans healthcare. They've already started removing protections for trans students in schools.
One of his executive orders recognizes only 2 genders on the federal level, requiring government documents like passports to reflect biological sex, not gender identity. It also bars federal funds from being used for gender-affirming healthcare, and mandates that single-sex spaces, like shelters and prisons, be based on biological sex. The order rescinds key protections for transgender people, including guidance on supporting transgender youth in schools. This move is a major rollback for LGBTQ+ rights.
On top of that, Trump has issued an executive order that freezes DEI programs across federal institutions, including schools, hospitals, and government offices. Basically, he's gutting all programs aimed at promoting racial and gender equity. Literally all federal DEI workers have been placed on leave.
This is already starting to impact students. Rutgers, for example, is stopping its DEI work because of these executive orders. We've yet to see the full impact, but it's clearly trying to reinforce the myth of a meritocracy and undermine even acknowledging systemic racism.
The Trump administration has long been a critic of DEI. He's called these programs to be divisive. But this latest executive order has serious consequences for marginalized communities. The fact that Meta, Amazon, Walmart, and Target are already pulling back on their diversity initiatives reveals the obvious. Their Pride clothing lines and BLM posts were never about progressivism and always about profit. Trump has also been taking steps to attack public health and healthcare. He signed an executive order targeting healthcare coverage for the working class, which could impact over 20 million people in the U.S.
He also made a blow to public health. He ordered federal health agencies to pause their communications, imposed drastic freezes on the National Institutes of Health, and pulled out of the WHO. All these orders could slow down crucial medical research and exacerbate public health crises.
Sounds like a pretty fitting continuation of Trump's last term, considering he spent the end of it denying the threat of COVID while millions of workers died keeping the economy running.
He also passed a national energy emergency bill lifting restrictions and allowing oil companies to go full-time with a drill baby drill promise. And he's pulling the U.S. out from the already timid and insufficient Paris Climate Agreement.
This all comes in the context of 2024 being the hottest year on record and the wildfires in LA. Capitalism is well on its way to destroying the conditions that make this planet livable. It's an existential threat to literally everyone, even the capitalists.
In an unprecedented move, Trump used his first week in office to commute and pardon the sentences of over 1,000 people involved in the January 6th insurrection. This includes rioters who stormed the Capitol in an attempt to overturn the 2020 election results.
It sends a dangerous message that violent extremism is acceptable as long as it aligns with Trump's political views.
It's interesting how the right considers themselves arbiters of free speech while censoring the left. Of course, they mean free speech for racists and the right of assembly for alt-right paramilitary groups. Yet those who have spoken out against genocide and taken to the streets for Palestine are targeted as the enemy from within.
And while the full scope of this is still unraveling, we should be prepared to organize against more attacks on the left.
In just his first week back in office, Donald Trump is laying out a vision that's nationalistic, expansionist, and anti-rights. From tariffs to immigration crackdowns, attacks on trans rights to freezes on scientific research, it's clear that his agenda is already in motion.
Yeah, it'll probably take months to see how much of his agenda will hold and how much pushback he'll get.
No capitalist politicians on either side of the aisle are coming to save us. And we can't rely on the so-called progressive leaders who already are adapting to Trump. We need to organize ourselves from below. Workers, students, marginalized communities, we need to organize from where our power lies.
Right. And Trump's strength comes from an opposition that's passive and complacent. The Democrats have nothing to offer except fear of the right. But we can't win with fear. We need hope. We need action.
First, we have to confront these attacks. Whether it's immigration raids, anti-trans policies, or union busting, we need to mobilize. Show up at protests, defend our communities, and organize from below. We need our unions to mobilize our ranks to fight back and go on strike to defend our rights.
And workers, students, and the oppressed need to harness the rage that we all feel and organize ourselves. We have to build bodies of self-organization inside our workplaces, inside our unions, in our universities, where we can discuss and decide on our demands and how to fight back. And these bodies can be the basis through which we can build a united front to fight Trump, to fight the far right, and to fight back against all the attacks on our democratic rights. And this can be the seeds of a new party, a working class party that fights for socialism.
This goes beyond fighting Trump. It's about building a world not governed by the rich and their thirst for profits, but a world where we prioritize workers over profits and international solidarity over imperialism. We may be far from that, but the fight for it starts now.
Obviously, we haven't covered everything that has happened in the first week of the Trump administration, and we can't with the time we have. But we're posting updates and analysis on our social media and website, so be sure to follow us at Left Voice. You can find all of our links in the description. Regardless, we hope this was an informative recap on Trump's first week in office and provides some insights on what we need to do going forward.
Thank you for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe to The Red Thread for more episodes like this. Let us know what you think by leaving us a review, and be sure to share the episode with your friends, coworkers, and comrades as we work to build the movement. Until next time, this is The Red Thread.